Can you teach your body emotionally what that future will feel like before it's made manifest? That means you can't wait for your wealth to feel worthiness and abundance. You can't wait for your success to feel empowered. You can't wait for your new relationship to feel love. You can't wait for your healing to feel gratitude or wholeness. You can't wait for the mystical moment to feel awe. That's the old model of reality, of cause and effect. Waiting for something outside of us to give us relief from the emptiness and pain we feel inside of us. And some people will spend their whole life living in lack, waiting for something to change. And if you're waiting, then you're not creating. The quantum model of reality is about causing an effect. The moment you start feeling abundant and worthy, you are generating wealth. The moment you start embracing the feeling of empowerment, you are stepping towards your success. The moment you're in love with yourself and in love with life, you will create an equal. And the moment you start feeling grateful and you start feeling whole, your healing begins. And the moment you are in awe of life, you will have a mystical experience. Now that's causing an effect. And so from going from one state of mind and body, the old self, into a new state of mind and body, a new self, and crossing that river means there'll be new opportunities, new experiences, new events in your life, because you're no longer the old self.
In a lesser-known work of Charles Darwin, The Formation of Vegetable Mold Through the Action of Worms, he documented how far earthworms acted consciously and how much mental power they displayed. He concluded that there was no absolute threshold between lower and higher animals. Even Albert Einstein offered support to this idea of a unified consciousness with all living things. In his 1949 work, The World as I See It, he calls for us to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature.
Whatever that original source of consciousness that has brought everything into creation, visible and invisible, we're just aspects of that. It actually highlights how much bigger and greater the Creator is.
If I realize that I am a child of God, that I'm just an idea in the mind of God, then and only then do I get to realize that you are the same thing. And on that realm, there is no separation between us. On that realm, there is no competition between us.
We're talking about a universal consciousness where I'm going to talk to the Spirit of God within every living being. Now, whether we call that the zero-point energy field, we call that universal intelligence, we call it God. The zero-point energy field is a new name for God. So it's an ocean of holographic records that houses within it the history of every living being and makes the connection possible through means of a quantum process. And that quantum process is unconditional love.
Unconditional love is the key to understanding the nature of our connection. While this intelligent and creative field permeates everything in our universe, its loving and creative nature is what draws us all together and binds us to the universe and each other.
If my energy is not coming from love, compassion, and forgiveness by whatever name I give it, then I am making a world that will not be happy for myself and others, by the way.
Now, you've got religious fears, you've got skepticism, you've got all sorts of walls that are there to stop humanity to increase its own cosmic consciousness. And they're all distancing themselves from the Spirit and from the face and the truth of God. And that's wrong. You cannot let go of the Creator.
I want to show you the difference between coherence and incoherence. On the left image where it says coherence, you're looking at the top of their head. Now, 19 different compartments of the brain that are connected through electrodes, and if all of those compartments are synchronized, you'll see the valleys and the peaks all lined up, and we'll call that order or coherence. If different parts of the brain are lagging or behind or out of order, then you'll see all of a sudden some of those valleys lining up with some of the peaks, and different compartments of the brain are not communicating well with each other, and we call that incoherence. When we see a lot of blue when we're measuring coherence, it means it has a low level of coherence in the brain. If you don't see any blue and you see pink, that's normal. And normal means average, what the average person experiences in terms of coherence. The red represents a high amount of order in the brain, and red means there's a super level of coherence. So now, this is a normal brain scan. This is what we call a strip chart. and we're measuring the 19 different parts of the brain, that brainwave pattern is low-level beta brainwave patterns. Now, the person's sitting there, their eyes are open, they're being their normal self. We ask them to close their eyes, begin to open their awareness, begin to open their focus from a convergent focus to a divergent focus or a broad focus. In a matter of seconds, this is what we see. Now remember, coherence is orderliness, and look how those waves are organized and stacked equally on top of each other. The brain is highly synchronized or phase synchronized in alpha brainwave states. Here's another one. Another person goes from a narrow focus to a broad focus, and you can see the entire brain is coherently in alpha brainwave state. Here's another person who has global coherence. They go from a narrow focus to a broad focus, from a convergent focus to a divergent focus, and you can see all of those different brainwaves beautifully stacked on top of each other, and we can say that the brain is highly integrated. If you look at that arrow on the right side of the screen, you can see that all of those peaks are lining up. That means the entire brain is in an alpha coherent state. In this slide, you're seeing someone in phase synchronized, coherent theta brainwave patterns. The entire brain is synchronized into theta, and they're in that hypnotic state. They're in that suggestible state where the lights are out in the thinking neocortex. And when they slip into that theta brainwave state, we can say that they're completely beyond themselves and they've dissociated from everything known in their three-dimensional reality. Our research, as well as other researchers at Princeton University and around the world, have found that if you can broaden your focus, as you begin to open your awareness, the act of taking your attention off of everything material and putting your attention on nothing but space. If reality is both a particle and a wave, if it's matter and energy, and there's an invisible field of energy called the quantum field that exists beyond this space and time, that you can't experience with your senses, but can only experience with your awareness, and that unified field, that invisible field of frequency, that is that very frequency that connects everything material and organizes everything into form. So then when you broaden your focus and you take your attention off of matter, you're putting your attention on that invisible field of energy, whose signature is oneness, whose signature is order, whose signature is greater and greater levels of wholeness. The person is feeling so whole, so in love with life, that it's impossible for them to want. I mean, how can you want when you feel whole? You feel like you have everything. And so we've measured this on people. And in fact, we can actually predict when it's going to happen to a person. We start seeing more and more order taking place in the brain, and all of a sudden we can say after a certain point, this person is going to have a very transcendental moment. And when we see those two hemispheres coming together, when that person is connecting and they feel whole, energy moves right into their heart, and their heart starts beating very orderly and very coherently. The heart begins to produce an ambient magnetic field. Now, field and the energy is beginning to broaden from the body, and that energy is frequency, and that frequency carries information. And now the person feels connected to something greater. And you can walk around and look at that person, and you can see tears of joy rolling down their face, because they feel so whole, they feel so in love with life, that they feel connected to something greater, that I call that the natural state of being.